This is another reaction video. Today I'm reacting to Jordan Peterson's advice for parents. So, full self-disclosure, I'm not a parent. I'm an uncle 7 times, and I did spend my 20s working with youth. So let's crack on. Let's get right into this. He's in conversation with the conservative commentator Ben Shapiro, who you may know, who famously invited us to notice that facts don't care about our feelings. He is a controversial commentator, and he is part and founder of the Daily Wire, which Jordan Peterson joined several years ago.
What you think is the single biggest and most common mistake you see parents make?
Your job as a parent is quite straightforward, and modern people don't understand what it is.
Okay, all right, sorry, I've got to interrupt super quickly. Right off the bat, I'm terrible. A lot of times I hear people, and it tends to be people on the right, talking about modern people. And I think what they actually mean is postmodern people. Bear in mind, modernity has been around, since the Enlightenment, right? So modernity's been around for hundreds of years. So modern people have been around for hundreds of years. That's not saying that everyone lives from a center of gravity of modern development, right? There's definitely people that have more pre-modern or traditional values. But postmodernism, which kind of came to the fore really, 60s and 70s and onwards, and has had a significant center in culture since then. This, I think, is probably what he and most people are talking about. But they say modern, but they mean postmodern. When they're talking about modern women or modern dating or modern men, they mean postmodern women, postmodern men, postmodern dating. Postmodern in this instance, meaning people who are in touch with their interiority, right? People who might say something like my truth is or your truth is, so that who have a value on subjective experience, are more open to things like healing and therapy, who want to reduce the stigma around things that traditionally we may have judged, that we're now being more inclusive, right? Which might be reducing stigma around people on the spectrum. It might be reducing stigma around people who have mental health issues. Like generally the project of postmodernism is actually to have everyone included, right? Now, at its core, there's definitely groups that aren't included, pharmaceutical companies, often law enforcement, the military, America sometimes itself, but we can get into that. But I just wanted to caveat that because I think that a lot of times we're creating linguistic issues because we're not actually diagnosing who it is that we are indeed.
Encourage your child to be maximally socially acceptable by the time they're 4 years old.
Maximally socially
At
acceptable.
4, their peer group becomes their primary socialization influence. And that has to be that way because they have to adapt to the current circumstance. And so the mistake is you can be a tyrant. I think that's a less common error now, especially with the absence of men that characterizes so many children's lives. But an excess of tolerance is not a virtue. You're there to, every time your child does something that would make them stand out negatively with their friends or with other adults, your job is to let them know, because what you want, you just need to think about this as a vision. You want your child to have the kind of manners and social graces and social intelligence that makes them unbelievably welcome to children wherever they go and fully capable of eliciting from adults a positive response so the world opens up to them. Why the hell would you not want that?
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate his taking a stand, right? And his kind of clarity of vision. There is something very attractive about this, right? Why would you not want children with high levels of social intelligence who can elicit positive response from their peers as well as adults who therefore have doors opening to them? Where I may get curious about this, right? So as someone who's coached a lot of people who would self-identify as people pleasers, the challenge with only an emphasis on this is that it's also going to play into the personas and personality preoccupations of certain types of people, right? Meaning people who are peacekeepers, people pleasers, empaths, people who are, for whatever reason, are likely to forget themselves, overlook themselves, diminish themselves, right? So to me, there needs to be a balance here, right? One of the things that we want to learn is how do you adapt and be flexible and responsive to other people, right? How do you learn all the social etiquette and graces so that it's there for you when you need it? And how do you also encourage your child? And it might be that you don't do these things at exactly the same time. And it might be that there's, developmental theory that says really you socialize the child first and then you help individuate them afterwards. But I know parents who are spending a lot of time, and I understand why, and I back them to do this, making sure that their children have voice and have expression and aren't shut down and don't overlook what their feelings are and what matters to them. Now, if it's all that, I understand what he's saying, that, an excess of tolerance, if you're always accommodating to the child may not learn that they actually need to accommodate to other people, right? And they sometimes need to fit in, and they sometimes need to be able to accept authority and kind of go with what the group is doing. But if a child gets a lot of positive reinforcement for playing the social persona called I don't have needs, I think this is a problem. And I see these people all the time in coaching. I can even relate to the part of myself that was deeply socialized to be socially intelligent. I got a lot of positive feedback as a kid, but maybe sometimes at the expense of what do I actually need and feel? And so maybe you can relate with this. I would imagine that as from an integral perspective on parenting, right? We don't want to be in excess in any way. We don't want an excess of tolerance. We don't want an excess of kind of over socialization. What we actually want is well-adjusted children who are able to work with other children and adults, who can pull for the team and who can understand the dynamics of a group, but who also are connected to their own expression, who have a voice and who know what they're feeling and can communicate what they need to other people. Isn't that the better way of proceeding? I'm not a parent. You tell me. What are you noticing? Hit me up with your own experiences, your own fears in this territory. Has Jordan Peterson got it right? Or is he kind of oversimplifying and therefore missing some of the great work that postmodernism and therapy and healing and all these modalities are trying to put into our lives? All right. As always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.